Hello, folks. I hope you're having a great day today. Hey, today I want to take a look at Arthur C. Clarke's short story called History Lesson. He published it in 1949 in a magazine for a pulp magazine, and called Starry Galaxy. And it's basic. My copy of it is in this collection that I purchased when I was in college, over in West Virginia University in Morgantown. And when I was there, I picked this up at a local bookstore, and I read it when I was in college. And I come back to the stories in it. I've read most of the stories in it at least once or twice since I originally read it, so 2 or 3 times. This one I actually hadn't gone back to, although I hadn't until just today when I wanted to reread it for y'all. I have talked about it, read about it. It is a popular story. A lot of the things that happen in it are things that are talked about quite a bit among science fiction fans or people that explore things that are related to this subject that's covered by with this story. So I wanted to go ahead and kind of talk with you about a history lesson. Many of Arthur C. Clarke's stories, particularly his short stories, will have these fun little moments where you're getting a kind of an idea of something a little bit deeper that's happening. Some interesting kind of moments that you may get, and you're going to get that from most of his short stories and some of his novels too. They're going to have these little moments, ideas that he kind of tries to crystallize in the form of a story, and this is going to do the same thing. So let's take a look at it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and give you a synopsis of the story. I'm going to take you halfway through the story, and this story has basically 2 parts as opposed to most 3-part stories. This one has 2 parts. The first part is on Earth, and then the second part is basically on Earth and Venus. The first part in Earth takes place in hundreds of years in the future, and there are a group of tribesmen who are trying to cross the big giant mountains, and that connect Alaska and the South. They've heard rumors that there's much better to land down there, and that the glaciers haven't gotten there yet. It seems very similar to the sort of journeys that you may have had, thousands and thousands of years ago when there was a land bridge over the Bering Strait. So they're crossed over, and they're not trying to get across the mountains. Unfortunately, they're going to fail and die. And ultimately, they're going to be trapped up there in the mountains, and they know that up in the mountains, there's no real way out. And their tribe is starting to dwindle in size. And so what they decide to do is they decide to bury 3 objects that are these precious sacred objects for future generations to enjoy, and to find. And those 3 objects are described by Arthur C. Clarke. Include a radio beacon, an untapped treasure that they don't know what it is, that nobody's ever opened, and then some other stuff in there too. So you can kind of see how these were all sort of treasures and tokens of our modern society that we're currently having, because this is set in the future. And by the way, that's when you're going to first know when this was set, is by taking a look at some of these. What are they having on these treasures? He won't tell you the year ahead of time, so you don't know the setting. You're probably thinking at first that this was probably an old trip, but it's not. But anyway, they're going to bury these treasures in a sort of a sacred cairn, and then they die. This tribe does. And they don't know this, but they're the last tribe of people alive. And so thus, with their tribe passes, so does human race. They pass as well. And that's the end of the first half of the story. And I'll go ahead and leave you there. It's going to be found by aliens, in this case Venetians, and then things will happen from there. They're going to try to figure out who and what we are as people, and try to, based on the information that they found previously, as well as the information from these 3 sort of treasures that they found. And that's an interesting story, as how will aliens sort of interpret America. It kind of feels a little bit kind of like Roger Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, which uses an outsider to kind of talk about the negative aspects of our society. In this case, that outsider was a human, but there are many others out there that do the same thing, that dig into the same space, that do it with aliens rather than humans. Or you might even get it from the Jungle Book or something like that, or Tarzan, where you have your main character, maybe somebody who was born human but outside of the normal, and they were upraised outside of the normal sort of upbringings, so they're going to have a different set of values that reflect their culture and their reality. And this sort of stranger in a strange land is something that you're going to see in a number of different places and locales, both during that novel and beforehand. So that has a few vibes in here, although this is a very different take on it. But the archaeological aspects of it are very well done. And I think the story has a lot to offer as a story, as many Arthur C. Clarke stories will. I mean, I don't need to spend too much time telling you who Arthur C. Clarke is, or like, you know, he's not like me and Louis Wellman, who's a well-published writer who people may not know about today. You probably know who Arthur C. Clarke is. You know, he's the guy who wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey, probably the most famous work today because of the movies that followed. And also wrote Rendezvous with Rama. I've reviewed for you 2 of his novels already. Childhood to End, which is one of his first novels. And one of his last novels, ironically enough, is The Hammer of God, which is a comet crashing down onto Earth with that potential. And so these space people have to intervene. So that's it. I'll kind of leave you there with the story. I do want to do a little bit of a synopsis with it. I do think there's a lot of good, strong ideas in here. The sort of ideas that you can talk about when you're talking about interpreting old societies, historical interpretation and historical analysis here in the story itself. I think that lends the story a level of credibility that it gives us. And like many of Arthur C. Clarke's stories, it can be a conversation starter for you, a resource, a reference material, and you can use it again and again to kind of tap into. It was published in 1949. It's a relatively short story. My collection is only 10 pages long. And my second time through it did take me half an hour for me to read it through the second time. So feel free to check it out. I'll link you to it in the comments below. If you like this video, there's no reason not to hit that subscribe button, because we have so many more of these reviews to follow of classics, science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Everything from older stuff from the 1800s to more recent stuff from the 1980s. Hugo Award winners, Nebula winners, Stoker winners. I'll be looking at lots of different people and the various writings. I've looked at novellas, novels, and short stories. But I wanted to take a look. This is the first Arthur C. Clarke short story I've done for you. Previously, I've just done some of his novels, but I want to tap into it as a part of this story for you. And hey, if you watch this review all the way to the end, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day. We all have such busy days and busy lives and so many things happening. So the fact that you spent this time with me, that's very compelling, and I really appreciate that. So thanks again. Have a good one.